and then how he excels at every level, Stanford, socially, academically, personally, and professionally, finds amazing job opportunities from that Stanford dormitory, and how he's able to build the right network then to get into an incredible dual degree program at Harvard University. This gentleman, I had the distinct honor and privilege of actually traveling around China last summer as we went to Nanchang, to Nanjing, to Chongqing, to Beijing, and of course in Shanghai as well. This gentleman is someone who's literally changing the world through his work, through his passion, through his initiative. And we're honored to have him join us from Switzerland today. Without further ado, let's turn it over to our star speaker, Mr. Hari Ganesh. Hari.
Greg, such a generous introduction, which I don't deserve at all. But hello, everyone. As Greg introduced me earlier, I studied engineering in India, have done a master's at Stanford, as he alluded to. I then worked in management consulting, which I think is the one topic which I am going to focus on today, how some of my study abroad experiences were able to translate into doing well in management consulting. And just for context, I'm in Switzerland. So I'm in my second of a 3-year program at Harvard. It's a joint public policy MBA master's program. And I'm working at the United Nations this summer in Switzerland. It's been a really good ride. So thanks. So I will get more into content. Feel free to send questions via chat. Thanks, Greg. Over to you, Greg.
Excellent. So, Hattie, we'd love to learn more about you launching your career at BCG, specifically lessons that you've learned from study abroad, and then also how you use those lessons to actually launch your career at BCG, and then lessons from the case study interview. I know that's really, really challenging for many of us, and yet you've excelled at that. And so I think there's a lot of great insights we can learn from that, Hattie, if you're comfortable sharing.
Perfect. So should I share my screen? I think this is...
Yes, please. Let's get to it.
Okay, great. Can people see my screen?
Yes, we can. Awesome.
Okay, great. So this is just some introduction about myself, which, as you can see, this is some of my backgrounds. And I'm not going to focus much on how I got into study abroad programs. Maybe that's for a different time. But the general idea is how I was able to succeed was always build on activities that I could do, extracurriculars, take that time and think long term. And I cannot emphasize enough that both these programs were possible. Both Harvard and Stanford were possible because of mentors who were, in fact, like encouraged me to apply and helped me through the process. So it was amazing. So coming to the topic for today in terms of management consulting. So when I finished Stanford, so I did a 1.5-year program at Stanford, and then I had a bunch of job opportunities. And then I decided to go to BCG, which, as you all know, is a pretty well-known management consulting company. And some of the lessons, so I finished 2 years at BCG, and now I'm doing my master's program. I already have a return job offer to go back if I want, basically in any office in the world, and they'd pay for my school, which is amazing. So just a few things which I thought helped me succeed at BCG based on my study abroad lessons. I think the number one lesson, which at every stage in life has helped me, not just at BCG, but even getting to study abroad, or even today when I'm working at the UN, or just when I set goals for myself, always aim for the stars. I just cannot emphasize, if you don't think that you deserve the best, if you don't think you can do it, then it's definitely not happening. So at BCG, for instance, specifically what that meant, I mean, aim for the stars from study abroad was that I chose to apply to Stanford, which, coming from a not so great university, maybe was not a smart thing, but I thought I can do it. Believe in yourself. There were so many moments in consulting or in study abroad, or where I feel like, okay, am I really so good that people are giving me this trust? Can I really do this? It's so important to have that belief. Only if you believe in yourself will other people be able to believe in you. And this especially so true in consulting, where you are working on, like, they give you really important problems and you are basically responsible for this. So if someone believes that you don't know, or if you're not showing that confidence, then really you suffer in consulting. Just as a side to that is this whole thing about self-awareness. It's so important to be aware of your strength and weakness, and not to, I mean, yes, you can aim for the stars. Yes, you have to believe in yourself, but at the same time, you have to be realistic. So for instance, when I was in consulting, I knew that I couldn't do slides very well, which maybe it's one of the most important skills of consulting, but I knew that was not something I did well. So I tried to focus on projects where I could do less of that. This was the same when I went to Stanford, for instance. How I think about study abroad was like, I knew the self-awareness that, yes, I'm coming from a very competitive applicant pool of Indian applicants, which is very competitive for Chinese too. So then how do I show that I'm different from others? So you have to just be aware that there are all these things going on, and you have to keep in mind reality. At BCG, the single biggest thing I would say that contributed to my success was people, people, people. And when I say people, what I mean is I had some bosses who were like my mentors, who believed in me, who invested in me, who I thought I was never capable of doing like some really complex things I did, but they believed I could do it. And it was, I mean, the only reason I would say I succeeded at BCG was because I found good people and I trusted them, and they were able to mentor me through that journey. Even today, I keep in close touch with them. And if I go back to BCG, I hope to work with them or go back anywhere in life. So I cannot emphasize how much good people matter. So I don't. So let me move on to the next thing about the case interview. So if you have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat now, and I'm sure we can come back to it when we are done. So if you think of some questions about this, please let me know. On the case interview process, when I arrived in the USA, I had not even heard of what a management consulting company was. I mean, I've read in newspaper, okay, McKinsey exists. And I didn't know anything about the case interview process, but I was able to go from not knowing anything about the case interview process to getting offers with many firms. And if I look back, what was for me key in the case interview was practice, practice, practice. I was manic about practicing every day. And you have to practice, unfortunately, in the case interview process with others. So you practice with, you get a group together and you practice. I must have practiced at least 50 to 100 practice cases before I actually started doing well in cases. The first few times I was like, what's going on? I didn't understand what's important. Second, communication. Consulting is so much about presentation and communicating your point across. So it's so important for you to be articulate and concise in what you're saying. It's not enough to know what you're saying. You have to communicate that well and in a way that's easy to understand. This is a more very tactical point, a few tactical points. It's, if you are in a case interview, nobody wants you to rush to the answer. It's important that you take your time, but come up with the right answer. So it's nobody will feel bad if you take an extra 30 seconds to think something. And on that line, there is no right answer in a case interview process. Everyone is only interested in how you're thinking. Are you able to bring a structured thinking to this problem? So if you make some small math mistake, or if this is an industry you're not familiar with, that's totally okay. It's all about how you approach the problem and think about it. Finally, I think, as I said earlier, confidence and self-belief. When you are in front of a CEO and you're presenting, you have to sound like you know what you're talking. It's so important to, even if you don't have 100% confidence, you should sound confident. Because if even in an interview you're not able to sound confident, how can they put you in front of a client and you'll be confident there? So these were just some things from the case interview process, which I thought were lessons I could share. The next, just a few general tips I thought about when I was coming to do case interview processes, or when I was working at BCG, or even today in general as life goals. Is actually, I learned some of these things from Greg very helpfully last year, but always it's valuable to think about how you're spending your time. It's not enough just to be like, okay, oh, I need to study for the Gaokao. Oh, I need to do this. I need to prepare for interviews. Think about, okay, what is my goal? Okay, if this is my goal, what are the priorities? Is my Gaokao score more important than my SAT score? Or is management consulting more important than banking? So you set your priorities, create like a list. Try to look at your list. For instance, I create a list and look at it every day morning. And I'm like, okay, what can I get done today? So for instance, I have a short-term list, medium list, long-term list. So I always am bringing some structure to thinking and producing my time. And of course, advice is always useful. If I never hesitate to ask people for help, because usually they have some insight which allows me to do it quicker. So anyway, I know I had 15 minutes, so I will. I'm very happy to answer your questions later. This is I have WeChat. Greg also has WeChat, so and this is Diad's WeChat. So I just wanted to put up that slide for 30 seconds or 10 seconds for anyone interested. Greg, I think does that sound good in terms of timing? Are we okay?
Yeah, we actually have a couple more minutes, Hattie. So I'd love to just throw one quick question your way. You were a standout student at Stanford, but maybe not just because of your good academic marks. Can you share a little bit about your approach as a student at Stanford and how that helped kind of leverage big opportunities for you?
Sure. I think it was all about, especially if you're targeting jobs like consulting, it's all about your social skills. It's all about how are you able to fit into the team environment. So school is a great time to get involved in extracurricular activities. I used to be in a lot of clubs, and I took up at every opportunity. I'm like, okay, what can I do to make myself better? What can I learn from club experiences? Are a great way to learn real life skills in like with low cost. I mean, like it's like no cost. Like in a job, if you make a mistake, it's a big deal. But in a club, it's a much lower deal. You also meet a lot of people. Some of my closest friends, in fact, some of the people who helped me get into BCG, I met through some of these extracurricular activities. There was a consulting club. There were a few other things. And especially when you go abroad, academics, especially in consulting, something like consulting, yes, academics is important to get in, but that's definitely not enough. It's about the full package. Like, what do you bring to the table? Are you a social person? Are you able to communicate? Are you able to work in groups? So I think, especially if you're coming for the first time abroad, clubs are such a great way to get integrated into the environment of working and living abroad. Does that answer your question, Greg?
It definitely does. And one thing that Harry was just brilliant at, leveraging his engineering skills and his desire to make friends to become a leader in extracurriculars, that actually helped catapult Harry to really the next level within his personal goals. And I think that that's a huge part of your success, is that you are a great student, but you know that's not quite enough. And that's a really inspiring lesson for me, which is really work to excel across the different areas of your life. Aim for the stars, as Hattie puts it. And I think that's an inspiration that all of us can take. Is that, yeah, we work hard on our academics, absolutely, but let's work hard to make ourselves the best version of ourselves we can be. And I think Hattie just truly exemplifies that in each aspect of his life.
Exactly. Just one final point, if I could make to that, Greg. It's so useful also to read a lot, especially when you move abroad, to read like current affairs, to read the New York Times or The Economist or something, just to know what's going on in the world. And it comes up in conversation, especially in interviews or things like that. It's so useful to, build yourself in a well-rounded way, as Greg mentioned. Okay. I see some questions which I will respond to later. Sounds good, Greg?
Sure. Yep. Hattie, thank you so much. We have some awesome questions, which we're going to jump into when we get to our panel discussion. Thank you for those that are asking questions. They're very, very helpful, and they're very smart. We appreciate that very much. Let's do a little round of applause wherever you are in the world for Hattie Ganesh for sharing some great insight. Hattie, thank you. Here, 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 here. Excellent. Hattie, thank you. We have not just one mastermind today. We have two masterminds here today, and we are in for a treat. Our next speaker is someone who truly exemplifies the Renaissance man, someone who is really, really thrived across disciplines, not only as a student, but as a public servant, someone who uses their skills to make the world around them even better, ranging from the sciences, literally doing very, very fascinating research into solving the cancer challenge and the cancer epidemic we face globally, all the way to the world of computing, the world of international education, the world of finance. And this gentleman, Mr. Aaron Primero, has truly excelled in each and every field, in each and every aspect of himself, to personal achievement, but also to giving back. He's one of our longest tenured mentors here at Dyad, and a gentleman who is always looking to go the extra mile, even when balancing very, very rigorous studies at Columbia University in New York, even when balancing extremely rigorous studies as a Fulbright scholar in the Philippines, even when juggling the difficulties of a financial mathematics and financial economics studies at Oxford University, even when working as a Goldman Sachs rising star, this gentleman finds a way to give back. And that's one thing that I've long admired about Aaron Primero, and one thing I think we can learn a lot from today. Aaron's going to share more on how he's used study abroad in his own life to continue to push his own boundaries, his own limits, to do more, to achieve more, to give back more. It's an honor and privilege to introduce our second mastermind and a great man to go with it, Mr. Aaron Primero. Aaron. He might be muted here. He is muted.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry.
Hi, can you all see me and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thanks, Greg, for that really inspiring introduction. Like, my goodness. And Hari, for your inspiring words. That was really something. And I'll kind of aim for the stars this morning when I walk into work. But it's a pleasure to be here and to kind of talk about my experiences and hopefully distill some value from them that'll be applicable to you all. Just by way of background, I graduated from Columbia a few years ago, after which I went to the Philippines for research on international trade, specifically on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and then did my master's in the UK at Oxford in financial economics before returning to New York for my current job at Goldman Sachs in investment banking. I guess what I want to impart to you all are kind of four broad categories surrounding like what I feel about study abroad. Firstly, the personal value, its professional value, some of the challenges associated with that, and maybe a few kind of pieces of advice that I would have told my younger self when I was, just much more stargazing and probably less knowledgeable of how the world works. And feel free to drill down or ask a question, and we can drill down into a specific category much more deeply. But I guess so I've been abroad for 2 years, and from that experience, there was a lot of, professional value that I gained from it, but I want to start with the personal value too, because I think this is kind of, at this age, you begin to cultivate certain habits that you will kind of take with you for the rest of your life, whether that's, making your bed in the morning or, brewing your own coffee or going for a jog or something every morning. And those are kind of the things that really become your character and who you are and what your personality is like. And study abroad can really kind of open the opportunity to exercise these sorts of things that you want to develop quite early on, so that they are not just only habit, but part of your personality, part of your character. And so these are some of them. You know, I think it was incredibly important just learning how to ask, being thrown into a city like Manila, in the Philippines, or even in London or at Oxford, you know, not only like having to ask for things because I was in a completely new environment, but also the ways in which you ask for certain things, and the ways you do that within certain cultural contexts, within certain professional spheres, because people interpret those questions differently based on how you frame them. You know, there's kind of a North American way of asking, you know, chest thumping and all guns blazing, but you know, while in Asia, there's a way of asking for things too that is much more respectful, much more staid. And I think being able to calibrate the way you ask for things is really important, both for your personal lives and professional career. I think the second thing that I really valued from studying abroad and just thrown into a new culture environment is simply learning by doing. While at school, I was very much a book learner, you know, like reading every chapter, taking copious notes, and really just processing information that was segmented into like chapters, textbooks, and study guides. And I felt that in the Philippines and in the UK, and now back here, you know, working, there's really no guidebook or syllabus, and you kind of have to just plunge forth and try to learn some new process or some new concept on your own. And it is kind of scary, and you do scrape your knees, but I think that's the sort of way you can kind of make the transition between being a very good student to being a very good professional, a successful person in any sort of professional sphere. So that's number two. Number three, I sort of mentioned this in my first point, but basically being able to calibrate the way you pose questions or ideas, opinions, in a way that you know, really respects the context within which you're in, and especially for a job like in consulting or in finance, when you really are dealing with multiple types of different people from multiple jurisdictions, and it's very sort of client facing. I think it's really important to tailor the way you project yourself, even if you do have what you think is the most valuable, meaningful opinion in the room. There's always a way to kind of cast yourself more as a contribution, or how can I, you know, be of most service to my client, versus just trying to pitch the brightest, best possible recommendation. And I think the opportunities, not addresses, that's a bit vague, but what I want to get across is that, like, studying abroad also exposed me to this idea that, like, my life doesn't have to be so completely US centric. My life doesn't have to be so completely based in New York, because I have lived in New York for the past 12 years. I went to school there. And always saw it as the beacon of, you know, all the corporate world. And so being able to transplant myself out of that was really important for me to see just how much activity, how much leadership in different fields goes on within different countries. And that was, I think that has opened me up to the opportunities too in the future to not constrain myself so geographically, but really following what is the best possible career path at that time of thing to do.
Love that, Aaron. You have some beautiful photographs to go along with that big point about like the freedom and the beautiful geography. Would you mind sharing that with us? I think everyone would love that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I will do that in just a second as we transition into sort of this last point of like welcoming distractions, which I think is one of the most important points to be able to, with any research, especially in the research that I was doing in the Philippines, being able to like allow yourself to read papers and that were like only tangentially relevant, or to Hari's point, just being well versed and well knowledgeable about all of these other affairs outside of your field, is not only good from kind of a developmental perspective of understanding what's relevant and becoming engaged with all these sorts of issues, but also I think in the working world you'll be constantly distracted. There's so many requests, and you will never be able to kind of lay out your schedule in the morning and follow it according to plan, just because there are new requests, clients want new things, and it's a really dynamic world. And I think welcoming also fun is absolutely key. I had so much fun studying abroad, and I think being able to allow yourself that and really indulging it, and then kind of just processing it and not necessarily having to kind of synthesize some life lesson out of all of it, are things you can speak to with clients and are just interesting things about yourself. This picture in particular was, I think we were singing some Titanic song or something, but just I think fun people don't emphasize enough, and I think it's a really important point.
Absolutely. And could you share your slides with us too so we can see?
Oh, sorry. Am I not on SlideShare right now? My goodness. Keynotes.
Awesome. We see it. Great.
Apologies. Sorry. So, okay. So I was taking you through all of this.
Wow.
Not, but I think, yeah, I'll just cycle through these. So yeah, this photo was the one I was talking about where we were just flying alongside Titanic. But yeah, onto how all this applies like professionally. I kind of alluded to a few things, but I think just along with like what I said with fun and like being interesting, I think, yeah, success, and even our CEO says this at Goldman. He said this to our intern class this year, that like any person who is successful needs to obviously know the content of their business, but also needs to just be a person that people want to talk to. And I think being able to tease out fun from people and also to indulge it, and also to speak to it, and to gather these sort of war stories, say, or interesting experiences, really builds much stronger trust and connection amongst people, and will really make you, more valuable. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about study abroad. I think the second thing too is just it's such a, especially in these like sort of international institutions too, it's such a powerful platform where even say now, like if I have some questions surrounding, currency dynamics in Asia, I can simply call up a classmate based in London and in 10 minutes sort of understand the dynamics like very quickly just from a quick conversation like that. Or say, if I read an article on the Financial Times about, what's going on in Singapore, I'll call up a Singaporean friend, we'll chat a bit, exchange notes on, where we've traveled. And then I would really want to like hear from like them, like on the ground, what's it like? What are the, political dynamics going on? And just being able to be like kind of at the center of that and being like forming this network around the world, and having that access to people who are on the ground, it has been like incredibly valuable for me. The third point is just flexibility, and I touched on this point, but like you're going to be within these industries, you're working with so many different types of people, and on so many different types of projects too. So just allowing yourself to be able to fluidly engage in on one task or alongside one person, and to fluidly do that with another is very important too. And lastly, a point on humility. And I think study abroad, because it sort of exposes you to so much, you're sort of forced, or hopefully you're encouraged to be more open to just input from all sources, which for me, I think really kind of grounds you and makes you aware that you ought to approach, even your most stringent views with an eye towards humility surrounding your assumptions, humility of the fallibility of your own judgments. And I think being able to do that will make you a lot more of an open-minded person, but also someone whom people could trust, that you're not just blindly charging in with this recommendation, but you're recommending cognizant of the fallibility of your own assumptions too. Greg, how much more time do we have? We can kind of skim through these slides quickly, or is there some sort of topic you want to drill down into?
Yeah, we're actually doing okay on time, so okay. I would love to keep hearing some insight here. This is great.
Yeah, sure. So on to the challenges of study abroad, because it's all not just like, all pros, no cons. I think certainly there are like transition costs to it too. You're not only transplanting yourself geographically, but you also have to like learn things anew, get a new phone plan. All of these logistics sort of add up. And especially since it's probably for a short duration, maybe 1 to 2 years, it can really eat up time that you could potentially devote to things that you already enjoy, already like. And so that kind of leads me to my second point of like opportunity costs. I think one of the challenges I had too was, when doing these study abroad programs, was just thinking to myself about all my classmates back home in New York, already starting their careers, and seeing how, in a sense now they're still somewhat ahead of me in terms of like expertise and career knowledge. So just being able to negotiate that with myself was challenging at first, and especially when applying to firms afterwards, trying to piece it all together and to project like you were very, very knowledgeable in that particular field to which you were applying. Which leads me to my last point about sort of building a narrative. I've mentioned like how study abroad can expose you to so many different things and to forces you to explore different issues as well as different disciplines. But in the end too, that can make it difficult when you have all of these pieces in trying to really build a narrative that's coherent, that has direction, that has refinement and trajectory towards a certain thing, which is hopefully that thing you're applying to. Like how do all of these pieces fit? And how does the story inevitably end up to suggest that, sitting in front of you, like in front of your interviewer, this next job, this next opportunity, it was all leading up to this. So I think because you're kind of tacking like a sailboat or something without just like a direct route, I think that just poses a few more challenges in terms of distilling that narrative, distilling that story. And then recruitment. I think job recruitment too, especially within banking, becomes a lot more tricky because these are extremely rigorous and inflexible processes with very inflexible timelines too in some ways. At least in the US, recruitment mostly happens one of two ways. First is through a summer internship while in undergrad. And the second way is through the internship in the MBA program. So you either have to kind of be an undergrad or the MBA program, and at least in the New York, anything in between that, it's hard to, well, it's easy to fall through the cracks. And so it just requires simply a bit more legwork, wearing out your shoe leather to really make yourself present and known, and to be able to fill potential gaps within these firms that are extremely efficient with not only their lines of businesses but also their recruitment processes. And we can talk more about recruitment later, I think, but I think that was kind of the biggest challenge for me, having studied abroad. And that leads me to my last kind of point surrounding things that I could have done differently. And I divide this into two parts. Firstly, basically all the things that while in school before starting my first job that I should have done. Sleep more, obviously. I could still use a lot more of that now. But then the second point, staying open to other opportunities. I am the type of person to really fixate on one certain job or opportunity and just work really, really hard towards it and laying the groundwork to gain admission to that. Because, I, like Hari, want to aim for the stars always. But at the same time, I think that sort of level of fixation for opportunities that are hard to reach, to attain, requires you to have like more than one plan B, you know, more than like a couple backup plans too. And I think, especially since I didn't understand the recruitment cycles in the UK versus New York, I think being open, for example, to working in London, I should have been more open to that, I think, than simply looking to New York as just the end all be all. So that's just one example. And then lastly, just like not worrying so much. Despite all the fun I had, I was a constant worrier, and just allowing myself to enjoy my time more in both the Philippines and the UK. And then in terms of stuff now that I have to keep reminding myself to do, are threefold. I think just finding clarity, finding intense focus, because my whole life I've kind of cultivated this kind of generalist approach to and to be knowledgeable and well versed in a whole bunch of topics. But I think as a first starting point in my career, I found it incredibly valuable to go really 1 mile deep into something, some topic, especially something that not too many people don't know much about, or are scared to penetrate because it's a bit murky, it's a bit abstruse, it's a bit complex. And for me, right now, that's financial regulation and all of the nuances surrounding that, and all of the dynamics as financial reform evolves not only here in the US, but in Europe and around Asia as well. And becoming the expert in that has really not constricted me, but really opened myself up to a bunch of different problems and issues and projects within the firm, but also for our clients for whom financial regulation is extremely important. It's also opened me up and exposed me to a lot of senior folks. And so in a way, like becoming an expert in something early on, I think can serve to the progression of your career, because of all, not only do you gain expertise in something, but I think it's easier to, if you do want to expand out too into some other field of or some other discipline, I think it's much easier to kind of like understand something really deeply and then broaden out, then start broad and then try to like converge and become really well versed in a certain topic or field. Hari mentioned this next one a bit, so I won't dwell too much on it, but communication and just engagement is absolutely important. And I still have to, that's something that, I continue to try to work on, and to become more concise, to bring the point across very quickly, which hopefully I'm not kind of failing at now, but I think the last point again is like not to worry so much, and to really just have fun again, and also to realize that you are doing important work for your clients, certainly, and you don't want to give them anything that's not of the highest quality that you're able to give. But at the same time, like a job is a job at the end of the day, and that hopefully like this is all just towards again, gathering certain tools and certain that become part of your character and that become part of your personality as an adult. So I'll end there.
Awesome, Aaron, thank you so much. Love the PowerPoint. Really, really dig the actionable advice and also the aspirational advice. A little round of applause here for our mastermind, Aaron Primera. Here. Awesome. But we just heard two fantastic mastermind talks. But ladies and gentlemen, this is not all. In fact, this is just the beginning. We now are moving into the most exciting part, in my view, our panel discussion. I'm going to invite Hattie, all the way from Switzerland, back onto the stage. And then we're going to have Aaron stay on, and I have the chance to ask a few questions that have been on my mind big time. And I'd love to welcome Hattie back up here. He's coming. He's finishing up in Switzerland. Awesome. Here he is. The first big question on my mind, you both have truly excelled professionally. As young men, you've really just done some amazing work. How about those of us just starting out? How do we know if investment banking or consulting is right for us? How did you go about finding clarity on that and taking those big first steps?
So thanks, Nick. So is that to me or?
To both of you, who has some insight? I know you both do.
Aaron, I think you should go first.
So first of all, is my screen still shared? I'm just trying to.
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, it is. Yeah, feel free to unshare, and then we'll see a bigger version.
Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out how this works, but I can multitask a bit too.
Sure, I can go first then.
Okay.
In terms of how I thought consulting was something I was interested in, I'd not even heard of consulting till I went to the US, and even now I don't think it's something I want to do long term. But for me, always the way I like to evaluate. Sorry, is my audio echoing? Greg, maybe you should mute. Yeah. So the way I like to think about it is, given my existing options, what is most interesting? So when I was looking at consulting, okay, if once I finish from Stanford, okay, I can go work at BCG. As Aaron was doing, I can go work in banking, or I could go work in a technology company. What for me is most interesting at that point of time, and what I liked personally about consulting was that you worked on a lot of different projects, you worked a lot with people, and you get to travel. So for me personally, that was why I thought consulting was a really good fit. And every time I make this decision, it's a different. In 5 years, if you ask me, maybe it'll be a completely different answer. But today, I think consulting is a great fit for what I would like to do. So I always like to think about opportunity cost in terms of, okay, this is an option given this universe of options.
Hattie, very clever point. I'll reemphasize that in a different way, which is think explicitly about what you're trying to accomplish, what is most important to you. Getting those priorities right can be really useful. And Hattie, you are a master of that. I tip my cap with how focused you are in making that decision. Well done. Our second question, Aaron, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, of course. So, I'll give this sort of PR answer first, and then give a more truthful answer. So for me, I guess I recognized early on too that, I come from a humanities background and a little bit of a science background too, but mostly humanities. And especially during my research in the Philippines, I recognized that in terms of economics and finance and the mechanisms and nuances that underpin those, that I needed just a bit more technical knowledge to add to my arsenal. And so I did this master's, and then I figured, that going to a bank and working within sort of the financial institutions group in particular, would be really beneficial, both from a technical perspective, but also I was just extremely drawn to like the sector in general, because reading so much about like how a healthy financial system functions, how that has externalities on not only its own industry, but so many other industries and so many other economies. Like, I really wanted to be in the thick of things. I wanted to be where all the action was, where the shots were being fired. And so that was the real draw for me at the time, to finance, to investment banking, and the financial institutions in particular, to really kind of boost my technical savvy with valuation, etc.
I dig that. And that's great advice to think about the skills that we need to thrive. We have to remember that we have like a 50 or 60 year career in front of us. So, hey, what are the skills at a foundational level which can open up a lot of new opportunities down the road? And Aaron, I think your approach has been really, really remarkable because you dabbled significantly and achieved significantly across a lot of fields and also have some really, really terrific skills to go with it. So that's awesome. Thank you both for illuminating with that answer. Now, a question that I know is always tough to think about, but I want to hear your honest viewpoint on this. What would we do differently in the recruitment process if we had the chance to do it over again? Is there anything striking or anything small that we would shift if we had the chance to do it over?
I can take this first one. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but allowing yourself to be, well, having the end goal in mind, like the kind of pinnacle of what you want, but also hedging a bit and like having like contingencies too is important, so that you have like an opportunity always for whatever next step you're going to pursue. But also, I think it gives you a chance to practice too. So because a lot of, say, if you cast a wide net for a lot of firms, you will inevitably be kind of repeating yourself and like refining your own way of presenting yourself or distilling your story. And if you're only applying to 2 or 3 firms, that really limits your opportunity to do that. But also, for the opportunities that you care less about, you also realize that you probably do much better. Well, at least I do much better in those opportunities because I don't feel the pressure or the nerves. And for me, those are oftentimes like what are my crutches for something that I really want, or, going on a date with a girl that like I really like. those are oftentimes the biggest crutches. So yeah, I would encourage you to cast a wide net, but at the same time to be mindful that like casting too wide of a net will also make you go crazy during the
Find that balance. Good point. Good point. Yeah, Hattie, I'd love to hear from you too. After we unmute it. Yeah. I did the same thing.
Okay, great. Perfect. I was muted by the host. Sorry, guys. So I totally echo what Aaron says. And looking back, I think I made the decision early that I was not going to do consulting and banking and all these things. And I think that really helped because a lot of friends were trying to do so many things. As exactly as Aaron alluded to, people were going crazy. It's much better to focus on like a field area. You are able to come across so much more authentic. You're able to give more time to it and just focus, to echo Aaron's point. What I would do differently, I think the value of knowing what the job is by speaking to people just makes you so much more competitive in the interview process. So yes, I went to information sessions. Yes, I did some of those things. But if you know what the job is and then you understand what they're interviewing for, then you can do so much better in the interview. So I don't think there's any such thing as that you've spoken too much to the company or spoken too much to people. The better you know the job, the better you're able to position yourself in the interview. That's just, and I use that now. For example, when I was interviewing for my summer job at the UN or any job I'm interviewing with, I try to do as much research as possible so that I understand kind of why they're interviewing the way they interview and what they're looking for, if that makes sense.
So really, really brilliant analysis from both of you. So find the right balance between too many and too few opportunities. Find ways to reduce our risk. Target opportunities that we're excited about, that we're passionate about, but also ones where we don't feel a crippling pressure around. And then as Hattie puts it, look, figure out what you don't want to do based on learning about what a job really entails. That is excellent advice, and I wish I had known that. I was a lot like what you were describing not to do, Hattie, where I had too many different things I was chasing. And the result was when I was a fourth year, when I was a Dasan, I actually wasn't ready for any one opportunity because I was spread too thin. So that's actually really terrific advice. Find that happy medium and figure out what the job really entails. Now, let me flip that question on its head. What did we do during the recruiting process that we would definitely do again? Is there like one thing that was so key to your success that it'd be the first thing you do again?
Key to my success? I don't know if this was the one thing that was most key to my success, but it comes very quickly to mind because now I'm on the other side of the kind of ledger now in these interview processes, and I'm always much more intrigued by candidates who, to Harry's point earlier, are well read and well versed in a variety of things. Not just reading the Financial Times, reading The Economist, but just well read in general, like reading books, novels, plays even. And I think it just betrays a level of engagement and also interest and sensitivity to specific issues. And that's the kind of person that I want to work alongside, and someone who is able to connect the dots between very different topics and disciplines. Someone who can distill a lot of data into very few points that are most relevant. And that's what I get. That's what well-read people signal always to me.
Hattie. I did not mute this time. I promise you that.
Sorry, guys, I was muted. To Aaron's point, I think, in fact, the boss of the organization I'm working with, we had a talk with her yesterday. She's just a fantastic lady. Will probably be future Director General of the WTO. But she said the one thing she looks for the most in a candidate, and I think which helped me generally in life, in jobs and whatever, is curiosity. Is just always be asking, as in whatever circumstance you are in whatever environment you are in, like asking and learning about what is going on around the world, as in novels, plays, or just even whatever you're doing. If you're studying, let's say, engineering, just like really think about why is something what it is, and being curious. I think the reason that helped me was just by nature of being curious, I was able to do better in case interviews and things like that. And I also had like a wide breadth of knowledge on random topics. For instance, when one of my case interviews was on manufacturing, moving something to Eastern Europe, and I knew something about Eastern Europe because I had read those things, and I was able to bring that knowledge into the interview. So I think reading and knowledge will never, ever, I mean, it's hard to at a given point assign some value to it, but over time, it will help you in so many ways. To say something, as Aaron says, to be interesting on a date, to do interesting things at an interview. When you're networking with people at these events, it's the more you know, people ask you, you just sound so much better.
Great advice from both of you. I think one of the adages we like to share with dyad scholars is follow your interests to become interesting. By naturally following things that make you smile, that you really enjoy, you actually build a lot of life experience that many people never will know because they haven't taken those big steps. And I think Aaron and Hattie both really hit the nail on the head here. read, engage, watch interesting documentaries and movies. Just put more information in your brain that actually excites you, because you never know when that will come in handy. Whether it's Aaron's, proverbial date there, or Hattie's interview, or something in between. I think it'd be really, really useful and valuable. And I'll say, we hire a lot of folks at Dyad, and we also love seeing that. It's universal across industries, not just consulting, not just banking. So for everybody listening in, read more, watch more, engage more, learn more, follow your interests to become interesting.
I think just one other point, if I can just make a quick intervention, was to think a little bit more long term, for instance, and to be willing to go outside your comfort zone. And this is not specifically for a job. If you think, for instance, last summer I had the amazing opportunity to come to China, work with Greg. We travel a little bit, but it was not something most people at Harvard would do. It was something very different. But the way I think about it, why did I do that? Because I think that China will be the most important economy in my lifetime. So the earlier I engage, the earlier I meet such amazing people like you all on this call, just learn about what people do, it's good for me. Today, I cannot tell you how much value that experience is when a lot of my Chinese classmates, or whenever people talk to me, I can sound, when we talk about China, I'm like, oh, okay. And then people maybe had been to Shanghai or Beijing, but I took the opportunity to go with Greg. We went to Nanchang, Jinan, went to all these great places. But the point, I think it really relates to the point that I feel like I have a much better understanding, and people value that. So people understand that Hari is willing to go outside his comfort zone to learn new things. And I've also gained like valuable knowledge. Okay.
Thank you, Hattie. And I will say that I've spoken to many students, and when I say I'm Greg Ma Chin Lee from Dyad, they say, oh, you must know Hattie. So Harry became quite famous here in China in a short time. One of my most memorable dinners in my life was eating some delicacies, sheep testicles up in Jinan with Hattie, which I'll never forget, really having a great cultural experience. And that has not helped me in an interview yet, although maybe someday. So, hey, great times. I'd love to quickly turn our page here. I want to know what it's really like to be an investment banker, what it's really like to be a consultant. I know this is a cliche question, but you are both very creative, and you'll give me a creative answer. What is a typical day like? Like, what are the duties and roles? How does that evolve as you go forward? And I'd love to learn a little bit more about what that looks like.
Okay, maybe I'll go first this time. So in terms of as a consultant, I think what is the only reason as a high-powered management consultant you are working somewhere is there's like a difficult problem. And really you are trying to solve something which most people believe is not possible. So my typical day, I would say, was you would go into the office at 8 o'clock. You are working with clients. So it's a lot about you speak to people. Let's say, for instance, a big problem I worked on was like a cell phone company was losing money. How do we help them cut some costs? So I speak to employees in the morning. I'm like, okay, can you please help me understand what the cost for these phones are, where you charge these things? And in the afternoon, I have like a meeting with my team to decide, okay, you know what, these are the 3 areas we think are most important. And then I spend the rest of the day doing some data analysis, making some slides, then dinner with my team, and then doing some more work. So I think that's really a typical day. Like you spend some decent % of it understanding the problem, working with clients, getting the data. It's important to always, at least at my junior level, for instance, you check in with some seniors, you get some direction, and then you work hard on solving the problem. And importantly, this is the most important aspect of consulting, presenting it in a way that other people understand easily. This is so important. Consulting, I mean, the joke I make is for 2 years, I was making PowerPoint slides.
I don't know what that is like at all in my role. No, I'm kidding. I spent a lot of time on PowerPoint, spent a lot of time on Excel, but the way I think about my role in my division is twofold. Well, it's a client-oriented business, and the way we provide for our clients is both in terms of advisory and execution. And then advisory informs what we're able to do on the execution side, or whether our clients want us on some certain deal, to issue, say, new capital instruments, new debt, or to acquire a company, another bank, say. And so that entails, when there's a deal, that entails a lot of phone calls, a lot of conference calls with both the client, with different desks within Goldman, not just here in New York, but also internationally, because sometimes a lot of these deals require that international coordination. So really walking our clients on the phone through, here are all of the logistics surrounding this particular deal, which is actually, a lot of people get really excited by deal day, deal execution, but I find it more boring than like the advisory piece, which a lot of people find much more boring, like creating pitch books and creating stories, which I actually enjoy, because you're kind of distilling a lot of information that's like, that really has no context if you look at it, from afar, but once you kind of think about it within the context of your client and more forward looking, what the implications are, I think you can start to like build a story out of it, like take that slab of stone and start like chiseling out like a sculpture. And for example, I mean, this is one example. I mean,
Can I tour the apartment? Yeah.
I mean, with President Trump came a new Secretary of the Treasury, and they published this report, this like 200-page report on like what the Department of Treasury hopes to accomplish in terms of financial regulatory reform. And so I would print this out, I would read through it, and I would try to distill it in 3 or 4 slides in the most, trying to unpack essentially the most important, the most relevant pieces that that our clients would face if these were to be enacted. I think that's such an interesting process. I mean, obviously there are nights that I don't enjoy that. I would much rather be home or on my proverbial date. But I think that, there's, especially when it's something so kind of complex, like if I had read this a year ago, it would have been alphabet soup to me. But now being able to like not only just read it, but within the process kind of like see myself in the third person and say like, hey, oh my gosh, like I actually understand this stuff now, and I can actually speak to it. I think that's like really exciting. So that's kind of part of my day to day. Seeing what the Fed publishes and all of these different sources, and being on the phone with clients, kind of guiding them through these different kind of shocks and these different proposals.
And really, really fascinating. I want to contrast the two answers in a really interesting way to me. Hattie, as consultant, shares, hey, here are a few kind of best practices to just really excel in your role, communicate really openly and effectively, check in with your superiors, get your work done as you go. Aaron, you have a really, really fascinating approach, which is, hey, I like doing something that most other people maybe don't like doing as much. That's a great niche for yourself. If you're like the storyteller on the team, you really enjoys the advisory side, big opportunities there. And so I think everyone here on the line and those watching at home on video, we can learn a really valuable lesson there. Follow the best practices, find what you really most enjoy within your role, and you can truly excel. Let me ask a kind of a related follow-on here, which is, what aspects of like the Goldman culture and the BCG culture, which of those most affect like the day-to-day? Which of those most affect your actual workflow? I'd be really curious, because we hear a lot about work culture, but what does it really mean?
I can start. So my perception of Goldman from the outside before coming in is very different from what it is now. And I was just very pleasantly surprised by, obviously the people there are very competent at what they do. But I was pleasantly, almost shockingly surprised by the level of character too and integrity within my team. I can't speak on behalf of the whole firm, but just by how much people there go the extra mile on behalf of their clients, and will even make recommendations that would benefit, say, some other firm, and not us, strictly on behalf of like our views that it's best for the client. So I was incredibly surprised by that kind of commitment, and so that inspires me every day to kind of think of new analyses that would be most relevant for our clients. And I was also just impressed by the level of teamwork too. It's a very team-oriented culture, which is not something you would think of like your kind of typical chest thumping, stomping banker, but there's a lot of coordination that goes on, not only like on our desk, but if a client has a question about something with which we're not terribly familiar, we'll call up a different desk that really specializes in that particular field, or we'll be on the phone with Hong Kong or London if it's like if it has to do with some like international regulatory framework. And everyone is so responsive and very curious too, and we'll walk them through the issue, and then they keep wanting to give, they keep wanting to participate and to be there for a client that's not even theirs. So that's kind of the pervasive culture that I've seen.
Amazing. That's really, really cool. How does that compare with BCG and its company culture, how that affects kind of the workplace? Hadi?
I think one, of course, echoing what Aaron said, the culture of putting the client first. It's more in consulting because there's no other product you're trying to sell, or there is nothing else that benefits another firm, which was great. But for me, I thought what was really interesting was how hierarchy doesn't matter. And I thought that's just like lip service, but there were times where my analysis, the person who has 20 years of experience will say, okay, Hari, I think you have a good point. So there was a particular project we were working on, and there was something I was like, I think we can do this. And then they were like, no, I think it's a bad idea. Then we did some analysis, then it looked great. And then they're like, you know what, Hari, this idea sounds great. You can do it. The fact that there's no hierarchy in the sense that just because I have 20 years of experience, it doesn't mean I know better than you. And then just as a follow-up to that, the amount of responsibility and trust that they give young employees is just like scary, which I think that's the culture of putting you, they call it, I forget the exact word, but it's always you're uncomfortably comfortable. So at every level, you're just given more responsibility than you're good at. So you're always learning, but at the same time, like I was making presentations and I was going to meetings with like the CFO of a $20 billion company. And I went to the meeting alone. And I was representing BCG's view, which was, it was just like scary. But the fact that they put so much trust and belief was great. And I think the ownership you get, I think that's the one part of the culture. It's like you are given ownership. It's not about hierarchy. It's not about your title. It's about what they think you can do.
That's awesome. And that sounds like a lot of trust and accountability for a young professional. It sounds incredible. Really, really fascinating learning about the different kind of cultures and how that really affects. That's fantastic. Now, the final question from our panel here is one that I think a lot about, and that is, what's like the one piece of advice that you would give to a Chinese job applicant? Let's say an applicant somewhere in the US going after a banking or consulting job. What's like the key nugget, the key wisdom that you would share for this person going after that job?
I don't know. You can go first.
I might be a bit boring here, but it kind of goes back to what I was saying about being well-read and being engaged and curious. That's very easy for me to tell. And I think it really all just comes down to that. Like, can I see this person not only like, working alongside me on this, like while I read this thing, right? But also, can they keep me interested with other topics? And so that's, I think I'll circle back to that answer I had before, and I hope that's not copping out a bit.
Not at all. I think that's timeless advice.
So I would say two things. There is much value in practice. This is more maybe to consulting. There is much value in practice. Obviously, the first time you do a case interview, when I did a case interview, it's like, what is going on? I mean, this sounds so scary. It's so intimidating. But the more and more I did, I really started enjoying it. I mean, case interviews became like a puzzle for me. And it was like, okay, can I do it? Can I challenge myself? And when I was in that mentality, I did so much better versus, oh my God, I'm interviewing for BCG. This guy has 15 years of experience. This guy knows so much more than me. So that really was, once I felt comfortable with what I was doing and I had some practice, I think I was able to do so much better. So my one piece of advice would be practice and take it as a challenge versus take it as like an evaluation. It's like, oh, this is an interesting problem to solve. And that goes with curiosity. The more curious you are, like I had some great questions when I was interviewing, but anyway.
Yeah, just an addendum to that, if you can hear me, because I guess I was thinking with the framework that like, you already know the technicals and you already know kind of what is expected of you in terms of like gauging your competence. So like alongside with case interviews, there's like the whole, understanding financial evaluation and all of these pieces. And I think like becoming just so fluent in that is like absolutely important. It goes almost without saying. And that's why I didn't even think about that piece, that you have to really know, at least in banking, there really are few curveballs that they can throw at you, because like valuation techniques or like balance sheets and income statements, they're pretty much, you just study them, and if you know them 100%, you know what sort of technical questions you'll get and you can answer them 100% right. So I think just like devoting a lot of time to just having that perfect and then expanding out. And it almost like to Hari's point, it almost becomes like fun. It's exploration rather than you're kind of engaging in this conversation and you're meeting someone and trying to learn more about the field, as opposed to like, oh my gosh, like what are they going to ask me? Can I answer this properly? And that's something that I can easily see in interviews. Like, is this person like being crippled by potentially like what technical question I'll ask them, or do they already have confidence in themselves to address what they know and what they don't know? And is this more of just like are trying to dance? And I think once it is a dance, that's when you like really know that you can work along someone. And that's when I personally really vet for someone.
Hey, and that's awesome advice during the recruiting process to start building some of these authentic relationships. Show your potential colleagues that, hey, not only am I an agreeable, likable person, I have the skills, I have the insights, and I'm fun to be around. I've heard jokingly referred to as like the airport test. Like, our flight is stranded. Is this person interesting enough where we can have a chat for 4 hours while we're waiting on our flights? And Aaron and Hattie, I know you both passed that test with flying colors. I've been delayed on trains with Hattie, and Aaron will have our chance too before long. So guys, thank you so much. The lectures were awesome. The panel's been great. We are now moving to Q&A. And the first question I see here is it's explicitly addressed to Hattie. Stanford seems to highly value GPA. how did you overcome that? Would love to hear more on how you try to create a holistic application, Hattie, with your background.
Sure. I think it's true that Stanford and every school looks at GPA. Every top school GPA is important. I didn't have a fantastic GPA. I think I had an average GPA. But the way to think about it is when a school is looking at your application, GPA is one part of it. I don't think the GPA, yes, you cannot have like a really terrible GPA and get in. But if you have a reasonably decent GPA, then you're okay. I really like to, so I was recently speaking to the HBS admissions officer, the new officer at the business school. And he made an analogy to the GMAT, which was, I thought, very funny, which is like the same thing as a GPA. He was like, if you have like, I'm just looking to make sure that you take a bath. So if you have like a okay score, I know you bathe. If you have a fantastic score, okay, you take a bath many times a day. It's not going to help me. So yes, I think GPA is important, but somehow I think many of us often think that it is the most important thing, and I don't think that's true at all. It's important to have a good enough GPA for them to look at your application. After that, it becomes all about the holistic application. And exactly as Greg had alluded to, I did a lots of extracurricular activities. Maybe this is a little bit about admissions, but the way I like to think about it is you always look at your admission as not like A or B applying to the school. Think the fact that they have like 1,000 Chinese applicants applying to whichever school. Why is it that they should pick me over 999 other applicants? Like, what makes me special? So for instance, in my specific case, most people from India worked in like computer science jobs, and they had like good academics, but I had like lots of great extracurriculars. I'd worked with foreign companies investing in India. So like they look at 90 same applications, and then Hari's application looks so different. I think so that's what really helped me.
Very, very good point. Now, Aaron, I know Columbia and Oxford are both notorious, very, very high academic achievers. You were a great student. I know that you're also a man of just excellent extracurriculars. I'd love to hear kind of how you found that balance, how you crafted that essay to really appetize those admissions officers.
Right. I mean, that's something I still find challenging today.
Yeah.
When I'm always like having new interests and new kind of passions. So I think it really comes down just to putting a stake in the ground on the ground that you want to be in, or the issue that you work on. And then everything is kind of like pitching a tent around that. And so, for example, if, I'm applying to, well, let me just make up an example. I think like identifying some issue or some area, say like, well, not making it up, like international trade within Southeast Asia, like that is the topic that I want to pursue. And like making that the centerpiece as opposed to me the centerpiece. I think that's really the way that to approach these sort of statements. Are we kind of okay? Yeah, approach these statements, and then everything is kind of trimmings to that. Your story is like your story becomes, how did this topic attract me first? What have I done since then to deepen and heighten my understanding of this topic? And what is the next step? Why is going here going to really expand my purview? And what do I want to do with that afterwards too? And so once you kind of ground yourself in a particular topic or area or issue, I think it actually, instead of like constricting yourself, it gives you more freedom to build the story with all of the things that I've done. And there's just a lot more fluidity and a lot more direction.
Very, very terrific advice. Now, another question that's come in here is, what is the relative role of like TOEFL and IELTS, like English exam scores, compared to personal statement and extracurriculars and awards and CV. The question is the English exam score more important for admission, or are all of these other big factors more important?
I have literally no knowledge of these sort of application logistics. So I don't know how you.
Yes, so I took these exams. I think the TOEFL is just like the bare minimum. Yes, you need to have the score. Okay, check the box. I don't think the TOEFL, like if they have a requirement of 110 and if you get 120, in no way does it make any difference to your application. They just want to know that you can, in the program, academically succeed. That's all. So.
Hey, Hattie, thank you for that. Yeah, the one thing I've heard recently from a friend who's a former deputy director of admission, I asked a similar question, which is, hey, how critical is that? Like, is a 116 TOEFL, is that the decision over a 112? Is that ever a tiebreaker? What role does it play? And this gentleman said, not really. It's basically, do you clear that bar? Is it good enough where you can communicate effectively during class? But there's never a point in which, oh, because your score is higher, you're in. So, Hattie, I think that's a really, really good piece of feedback there. Our last question here, because I know we're coming up on our time together. Our last question here is, what's next? In the sense, it's 2017, and it's already August 8th. We're already halfway through the year. What's next for you, Hattie? What's next for you, Aaron? What goals are you working toward, and what advice do you have for those of us working toward our goals too?
So I finished my internship in 2 weeks, go back to the US, my last year of school. And then I really this year have to figure out what I want to do after school. So I think that's like a really tough job. And I think that's exactly where where you have to set your priorities, think about what you want. I think Heather asked a great question about, you work so hard in consulting and banking, then you don't have time, which is true, which is why I don't think I want to do consulting long term. So you just have to set your priorities. So this year, I think it's a lot about me to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? Is the hours important? Is the prestige important? Is the money important? Figure out those things and then make a job that works for those. And my advice for everyone, or my best wishes, is that you all aim for the stars, and I hope you can achieve your dreams. On my chat, I will type out my WeChat too, so I'm happy to answer questions if you had any follow-ups.
Good advice, Hattie. Aaron, how about you? Any goals you're working toward, and advice for those of us setting ours?
Yeah, I mean, this little niche I've found within financial regulation is not something, I didn't grow up dreaming to become a financial regulator. But I think it's a niche that I've found really fascinating, and that's going to become increasingly relevant everywhere. And so I kind of want to see that play out more on the policy side. And maybe that entails my going back to school for a bit more. Maybe it entails me kind of transplanting myself to a different jurisdiction that allows me to see how governments and regulators are kind of tempering their sort of macro-prudential standards with opportunities for growth. And so I'm kind of, I guess that goes back to my point of like seeing what issues like really interesting or really relevant, and being in the thick of things and where the shots are being fired. I identify this as one of those, and so I've been kind of thinking of ways of positioning myself for a role within financial reform policy, and going back to school or going to a different country and understanding those issues from that lens I think would be the next step for me.
Awesome. And for those of us thinking about our career path, thinking long term, Aaron is building a great foundation for a career in financial regulation. He's thinking not only one step, but 2, 3, 4 steps ahead. That's really, really clever. Heather asked a really smart question in the chat box over here, which is, what academic majors best prepares for consulting, Hattie then replied, look, actually any is probably okay. Maybe management or business is slightly better, but it's really a maybe. So for those of us looking to get into consulting, it's less important what you study, what field. More important that you're doing really well in that field. You're meeting the right people. You're learning how to do the case interview, and you're building that comprehensive, holistic knowledge and understanding and the communication skills, is how do you put it, more so than just your particular major. So I wish you the best, Heather. And for all of our friends, both here live and tuning in at home, let's give our masterminds one last round of applause. This was fantastic. Thank you. We are live from the United States, from Switzerland, from China, and from numerous countries and continents all over the world. This is our first Mentor Mastermind, and we are thrilled that you took part both live and on the record. We can't wait for the next. Aaron, Hattie, thank you so much, and Godspeed from Shanghai. Shisha, thank you.
Bye, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Zaiqian, thank you.